1920s and 1930s Germany was a hotbed for design excellence. This was largely influenced by the Bauhaus movement. The Bauhaus movement favoured functional design with a modernist twist over style for styling's sake. They wanted to bring elegant, beautiful design to the masses so that anyone, whether you're a man, woman, old, young, rich, poor, could enjoy these beautiful styling details. I'll give you two perfect examples of the everlasting influence and reach of the Bauhaus movement. Number one is the Barcelona chair, and number two is the Cesca chair. It's almost impossible to believe that these two Bauhaus bits of design excellence are almost 100 years old. They look completely modern in any situation right now in 2023. And this is where the story begins with the BMW R18. Back in 1936, just 3 years after the end of the Bauhaus movement, BMW came out with the R5. Now this was a bike that was only made for 2 years and they only sold 2,000 models, but both from a technological point of view and a design point of view, it was a bike that would inspire and influence motorcycles for decades to come. And if you were in the know about motorcycles, if you were a connoisseur of biking, this is one of the must-have bikes from the 1930s. The grandfather of the owner of the Goodwood estate, he was one of the owners of those 2,000 motorcycles. BMW decided a few years ago that they wanted to make a bike that was more a celebration of a mechanical structure, a soulful machine over any performance pretenses or elements. So they set to work, in essence, creating a modern day version of the BMW R5 from 1936. They decided to launch the concept R18 back at the Concours d'Eleganza in 2019 on the banks of Lake Como in Italy. And can you believe that a bike that's taken its design inspiration from a 1930s design that looks so gloriously perfect, so elegant now here, almost 100 years on, it's perfect. Look at the shape of the frame, this triangular shape, but then with the soft teardrop style tank on top of it. The forks, for example, just like that R5 in 1936, they are slightly convex. They come out slightly and then go back in at the bottom. If I sit on the bike, this is what I see if you come round here. It's just everything is so perfectly in proportion. From a rider's point of view, it has to be one of the most elegant positions you could ever dream of. Tiny, beautifully elegant little speedo there, but right in front of it you've got the huge headlamp with the chrome surround. And this is the level of detail to which BMW have gone to. One wire here and symmetrically one wire here. One brake reservoir here and exactly the same here. Everything is so beautifully, perfectly aligned, so elegant. No styling for styling's sake, but the styling that is there is completely faultless. I think when BMW got into the room to initially discuss BMW R18, a new take on a 30s design, I think they politely said to the accountants, "I'm sorry, can you step outside for this one?" And in place of those accountants, they brought in the finest design minds at BMW, because BMW have left no stone unturned. There are no oversights, no areas of cost cutting, no areas of poor quality, no wires that look messy. This is one of the most exquisitely designed bikes I have ever seen. Take a look at this as a few examples. And bear in mind, I could go on, so I'll try and keep this brief. Have a look at the BMW logo at the end of this exhaust here. Look at the exposed drive shaft here. Exposed. It's industrial levels of gigantic, but so beautifully elegant. Again, everything exposed, no styling for styling's sake. And here, pure brutalist inspiration. These gigantic engine cylinders just punching out to the left and right. Huge elements. But then the elegant teardrop tank and have a look at the badge. Is that not the most exquisitely designed tank badge you have ever seen, with 2 screws on either side? It's a breathtakingly beautiful thing. The lines are just perfection. I almost forgot about the specs. I'll tell you them now. And bear in mind, this bike is not specifically about specs, but if you really must know, it's an 1800cc bike. It's got 91 horsepower and the weight is 345 kilos. If you go for the base version of this, it's £17,500 sterling. And if you want this, the 100-year special anniversary, where you get extra chrome, oxblood seat and things like that, well, that will set you back £21,500. Now, being slightly unusual for a cruiser bike with the boxer engine, you've got the 2 gigantic cylinder heads sticking out, and what I can immediately feel before even riding that is they act like a pendulum. Sometimes I like to do a lean test on a bike, but there is no way you're going to be able to do a really decent lean test, because especially at slow speed, that is decently unwieldy if you start putting it over to an angle to the left or right. Again, BMW wanted to keep that technological element out of sight, but if I press the on button here, you can see it's such an elegant thing, just with the speedo at the top and a very small, little, simple but elegant LCD display. I press the mode button and I can see it goes from rock, rain and roll. So they're the 3 different riding modes. If I press on menu, I can see I've got the MPG, I have the date, I have the battery voltage, and I have the miles per hour average. Do you know one thing I don't have? The tank range. Why did BMW do this? Why, on a brand new bike that costs £21,500, do I not get to know what the range is of the bike? Do I not deserve to know how far I can go with the bike? I don't buy the argument that this is an old school design element, because you wouldn't tell me what the battery voltage is if you're not going to tell me what the range of the tank is. There is no common sense argument for not having a tank range. I don't want to play some kind of mathematical game every time I'm riding along to figure out if I can get past the next fuel station. I just want to know how many miles left I can ride until filling up. But we'll forget about that, because all I have to do is look at it again and I'm in love. A good cruiser, it must feel like an event to ride. You have to feel speechless with excitement to get on it. And that ride itself, every second you're riding a good cruiser, you have to feel incredible. And the R18 makes me feel as incredible as any of the best cruisers I've ridden, whether it's Harley Davidsons or Indians or Triumphs as well. It's got that air of brutality to it. Without exceeding my expectations in any areas with regards to the dynamism, it is completely competent in all areas. That engine is strong throughout the range. I really feel when I'm riding this like I'm riding a timeless piece of engineering, a bit of a classic, something that will be remembered and talked about for years to come. It's got that very, very special feeling. All of the things you'd expect to be good from a BMW with regards to the gear change, the brakes, they're all good. The handling is good, although as I said earlier, lower speeds with the engine sticking out like that, it does slightly act as a pendulum effect. There are some negatives, and these negatives predominantly come from the very thing that make this bike so special. The gigantic cylinders sticking out on either side, because yes, they make it slightly unwieldy, but the bike is compromised because of them, because it means you can't have forward controls, which for a decent amount of the population is a potential problem. So when I'm going on longer rides, and I'm 6'1" and this is how I sit, it's difficult for me to readjust my legs into different positions just to get a new area of comfort. It also means that when I'm changing gears, you can see my foot position. My foot is covered by that cylinder jutting out. So until I get used to riding the bike, I'm guessing where the gear change is. And exactly the same principle is on the right hand side. My foot is completely covered by that cylinder sticking out on the right hand side. The suspension's also slightly on the firm side. I was going along the dual carriageway and there were slight imperfections in the road, and every time I would go over an imperfection, I'd jump up like this, and I could sense the car behind me laughing at me in anticipation for the next imperfection in the road. So it is not the most forgiving of suspension setups. However, rattle, crashes, they're words not associated with this bike. It will thump over those imperfections, but it's far, far too well built to be crashing or rattling over them. This may be a slight compromise with the Boxer engine, but what you get as a positive is this. If I just bring you closer to the bike, I'll show you how it looks on a startup. Have a look at this. If I get you to look at my exact position, I'll show you how much character this bike has. Watch the mirrors and the handlebars as I fire it up, because you will see the bike shift from left to right with that huge Boxer engine. And then you just leave it on idle and you can see everything vibrating around you. Harley Davidson, eat your heart out for character. That is possibly more characterful than anything I've experienced. And there's also a lot of common sense on this bike, because if I fire it up, and it's a heavy bike, and sometimes I may get in a position where I just cannot get out of it, well, there's no problem there. Push the lever down. Reverse gear. Starts to make the BMW look like decently good value. As I ride along, I always notice more design elements, and I can just see here the pride that BMW have taken from this really German masterpiece in design. I've got here Berlin built, Berlin built, Berlin built, Berlin built, and Berlin built. The Boxer engine may be seen as a compromise, but really it should be seen as a hugely positive thing, because this is what makes the BMW R18 so special. So just look at this purely from a positive point of view. I know you won't be able to put your feet forward, but that is what this bike is. That's what makes it so special. It's an engineering feat. One thing that's annoying, this is Bauhaus, it's functional design. I can't see any USB outlet on this bike. There's one service port just down by my left foot, and maybe you can buy a USB adapter, but I want a USB outlet on the handlebar so I can easily charge my phone. This is design basics now, surely, for all modern bikes, to have on the handlebar a USB outlet. Surely 90% of all riders want that, yet so many new bikes don't offer it. I don't understand it. Let's look at the competition. You could look at the likes of the Triumph Speedmaster, but really this is in a completely different league to that. The Speedmaster's 13k and a 1200cc bike. We really need to look at the Harley Davidsons, the likes of the Fat Boy at £22,600 compared to this, the 100-year special, at around 21.2k. Or you could look at the base model version of this at about £17,500, and that is about £300 cheaper than the Harley Davidson Sport Glide. And I promise you, the BMW loses out in no area at all with regards to performance, build quality, that level of theatre. It is on par in every single area. But here's what's interesting. Is it possible, genuinely possible, for a European cruiser to be able to crack the US market? Are the US ready for anything that doesn't have a Harley Davidson badge, and to a far, far lesser extent, an Indian badge? I think the facts I'm about to tell you now are indicative of the uphill struggle that any European cruiser will have, because in the UK, if you want a base level R18, you need to pay £17,500. If you head over to the US, you need to pay for a brand new BMW R18 £12,200. That is a colossal discount on the US market. They have dropped the price down to such a huge amount, it becomes almost impossible to ignore. To get this much design style, build quality and engineering excellence for a brand new bike for £12,200, it shows the difficulty BMW have in the US market. And then we come over to the UK market and we look at it from a used proposition. £9,900, I've managed to find a 2020 model BMW R18. That will be a drop of roughly £7,500 in the past 3 years. You'll have to add a bit of depreciation, you'll have to add a bit of inflation into that, but as near as makes no difference. £7,000 lost in 3 years. So they do depreciate fairly heavily. And if we look at it from a used proposition, just under 10k for so much bike, I would say that's got to be one of the best used bike buys on the market at the moment. In the 1980s, 90s and 2000s, Saab, the car brand, was always famous for being the vehicle of choice for architects and designers. And that's because architects and designers demand a certain level of design excellence and exquisite materials used. And Saabs were always over-engineered. It felt like there was no real budget in place to make sure those vehicles were the best possible vehicles that Saab could build. And similarly with this, the BMW, it really feels like they've left no stone unturned. They have done everything possible to make this the finest cruiser in the market. And it really has a uniqueness to it. It's not like anything else at all. It brings a new level of class to the big cruiser segment. It's a genuine celebration of the very finest Germany can offer, the engineering excellence and the timeless design elements. For me, it is one of the most special motorcycles I've ever ridden, and every day that I've been with it, I notice new design elements. It takes me 5 minutes extra every time when I park it up to go upstairs. It's a thing of beauty, and it will continue to be a thing of beauty for years to come. This design will never get old. It will never ever be dated because of where it's come from, because of that 1930s influence. It's a stunningly, stunningly good machine. And I'll wrap it up there. I'd love to hear from you, actually, before I forget this. Any Americans? Is something like this, the BMW R18, enough to make you seriously consider moving away from, for example, a Harley Davidson? What are your thoughts on this big BMW? And for any Europeans, how do you feel about it? Is this R18 enough to tempt you into the cruiser sector of the market? Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.